Hello, and welcome to the Journeys of Folco Hornblower, the One Ring 2nd Edition Strider Mode adventure, written and narrated by me, Ryan Hewlett. Book 2, Chapter 1. The sound of a rooster crowed in the background, as Folco slowly opened his eyes from a deep slumber that finally felt restful. The room that he had been staying in at Wood End in Woodhall was fine, but nothing like the finely decorated and comfortable rooms of Beg End, Brandy Hall, or even Farmer Maggot's home in Banfurlong. It suited Folco, however, and the stay was covered by the master of the inn, Odo, so who was he to complain? Folco stood dressed in his sleepwear and peered out the window, overlooking the main road of Woodhall. Already the woodsmen, farmers, merchants, and other hobbit workers were busy going to and fro about their morning routine, starting the day. Folco took in a deep draw of air, and with a sigh, said to himself, "It's time." He rubbed his shoulder, remembering the events that transpired a little over a month ago. First the attack at Buckleberry Ferry, then at the High Hay in Crick Hollow, and then the Old Forest. Folco looked over towards his clothes, his gear, and walking over, picked up the knife that had belonged to Berilac, unsheathed it, and sheathed it back again. Nodding his head, he laid down and proceeded to get ready for the day ahead. Walking down from his guest room and down into the main room of the inn, Odo, standing behind the counter, greeted Folco. "Well, good morning, Folco. The usual today?" Odo not too worried about the response. Folco's order for breakfast had been the same, and not much chatter between the two occurred since his return to Woodhall. "Not today, Odo. I believe I'll take my leave. I'm appreciative of your hospitality these past weeks. I hope it wasn't too much of a burden," Folco said, quietly. Folco walked over to the counter and laid his pack down on the floor, resting his other belongings against the edge of the counter. Folco looked over behind Odo, the axe of Berilac proudly mounted and displayed for all visitors to see. Engraved in the wood it read, "Berilac, feller of trees and wicked beasts." Folco looked at Odo. "Take care, Odo, and make sure that the axe stays good and true." Odo turned his head and looked over at the axe, then to Folco. "It will for as long as I am here, and next to who takes over. Berilac may have been a sour one, but honorable and set of heart he was. Where do you think you're headed to now that his affairs have been taken care of?" Folco grabbed some freshly baked biscuits, wrapped them up in a cloth, and placed it in his pack. "I'll wager I'll head up north, to the Greenfields. Been hearing some hunters have been finding some treasures in some rabbit holes up there. Always wanted to see where old Borlor took, faced the goblin horde, after hearing the stories my grandfather would tell me as a young tween." Odo chuckled. "Well, it won't be anything like the Woody End or the Old Forest. All you'll be finding there is rabbit holes and rolling hills of green. But, go. You've been here long enough. I can see you're itching for adventure. You've done proper by Berilac, helping out the town and attending to his affairs. I don't think many who just met him, let alone known him long, would have done the same. It's testament to your good character, Folco. You'll have a place to stay here any time." With that, Odo extends his hand, Folco reaching out in kind. "Thank you, and before I leave the Shire, whenever that is, I'll come back to say goodbye. Until next time." Folco, grabbing his things, nodded to Odo, and walked towards the inn's rear exit and to the stables. Folco's trusted pony Billy was standing, waiting there as always, in the stable to the far end. Ever the trusted friend and loyal companion, Billy's time at the stables at Woody End, and his time helping Folco move cords of wood over the past couple of weeks seemed to have made Billy grow bigger. His height was the same, but the heavy work and constant supply of feed ensured that Billy's muscles grew larger, and his physique widened. What was once a frugal pony now looked fit and durable. The time Folco and Billy spent hauling wood, pulling up stumps, and moving loads of other material to and fro to Woodhall and the surrounding camps strengthened the bond between the two as well. Hand-feeding Billy for an early morning meal, Folco set his pack and gear on Billy, secured the load, and led him out behind the inn and into the wood, hoping to reach Whitfurrows by late evening. The first leak crossed the northern tip of the Woody End, and after Folco spending quite a bit of time in the forest around Woodhall, didn't pay much attention to the trees as much as he had when he first entered the forest after leaving Beg End, on his way to Bamfurlong. Not that he didn't find it pleasant or beautiful, but it was starting to look a little too familiar and started to grow a little more like the Chetwood outside of Bree. Comfortable was what came to Falco's mind. The next 2 or so leagues north were a mixture of well-tended farms to wild rolling grasslands, where the occasional deer, rabbit, and other wild game roamed free. Falco reached the stock road and, looking past, saw the road leading north to Whitfurrows. Not that he was shy, but Falco stayed just off the main road and traversed the way over hedges, through the occasional small groves of trees, or weaving his way through the small valleys between the hills. As evening approached, the lights of the lamps in the thoroughfares of Whitfurrows began to glow. Falco turned his way to the road to finish his journey. No need to spook any bounder on patrol, after all. Now that Whitfurrows was on the eastern crossroads of the East Road and the northern road leading to the hills of Skerry, and arguably the industrial centre of the Shire. Like Waymeet in the West Farthing, Whitfurrows was the first place all manner of people met to have a tale or two told, drink to quench their thirst, and a place to trade wares. At any given time, passing dwarves travelling to and fro from the Blue Mountains to their kingdoms to the east could be found here, and Falco noticed no different. As Falco entered the main square, scores of hobbit merchants were cleaning up from the day's trade, dwarves securing loads of traded goods on their heavy carts, and a handful of men of Bree were present as well. As the air was warm and the skies clear, tables, chairs, and benches were all being dragged out into the square, each inn, tavern, and food proprietor getting ready for an evening of food, drink, and eventual song. Bounders were out, keeping the peace. "Well, Billy, let's get you settled in for the night, and we'll get going in the morrow." Billy nodded in approval after a handful of moments. Falco came upon an inn, seemingly less visited than the others he passed by, and that suited him just fine. The Turnip's Root was a fine inn by any hobbit standard, even to Wood's End and the Pony, but it definitely didn't match that of the Green Dragon Inn in Bywater. Falco figured the name probably soured visitors to it, but that didn't matter much to Falco. Much quieter this way, he thought. Setting Billy to feed on some nearby grasses, Falco opened the door and going inside. "Greetings, and welcome to the Turnip's Root. How long will you be staying?" The innkeeper, a one Mungo Grubb, said, being somewhat surprised by Falco's entry. "Just the night, and a place for my pony as well, if that's available," Falco asked, pointing outside. "Why, yes, of course. We have a couple of stables out back. Should do it just fine. We have plenty of feed for him. Turnips, in fact. Hopefully he likes turnips," Mungo asked a little too enthusiastically. "Not much Billy wouldn't eat. The turnips will do just fine, thank you. May I ask, where's a good place for a weary traveller to eat and have a good drink?" "First time? I guess second time I've been through here." Falco, now rubbing his forehead and scar, remembering the story Bilbo told him of how he was found and he ended up waking up in Bag Inn. Seemed like a lifetime ago, Falco thought. "Well, I for one fancy the Blue Perch, just across the way. Or if you're really adventurous, the Foxhole, on the other side of town, near the east. Especially if you're looking to rub elbows with the dwarves." Mungo, moving from behind the counter, pushing Falco outside. "But before you go away for the evening, let's get your pony settled and your gear to your room. Oh, forgive my manners. Who should I put the room under? Mr. "Folco Hornblower," Falco, reluctant to say. Mungo nodded his head. Folco Hornblower. "Don't believe I've had a hornblower stay here before. What part of the Shire you hail from, anyway?" Mungo said, a little dumbfounded. "Oh, I'm not from the Shire. I'm actually from Bree Hill to be exact," Falco responded. Mungo's eyes widened a little, and excitement filled his eyes. "Most excellent. Hadn't had anyone from Bree come stay here before. I mean, not too many hobbits travel from Bree, at least not for a long time, so I've heard. Almost thought the works of ye end up and left and went somewhere else. Used to come here and trade like the dwarves and men, but been a while. Frankly, don't believe it's been not for 2 or 3 generations." "Well, either way, thanks for choosing the Turnip's Root." Mungo, leaning back proudly, giving a nod and a chuckle. Mungo led Billy around back and into one of the 2 stables there, as Falco unloaded the gear off Billy's back and started to brush his coat. Mungo returned with a basket of large turnips, setting it aside. "Well now, that should do your pony, and a fine-looking pony he is. Don't believe I've seen one as strong as that around here." Falco, continuing to brush Billy down. "That's because he's a Bree pony. Tough as nails and loyal to a fault, aren't you, my friend? Billy nodding and neighing in agreement. Mungo chuckled and waved Falco to bring his belongings inside, following suit. Falco, looking for a little less activity, decided to visit the Blue Perch. By morning he wished he hadn't. Filled to the brim with hobbits, Falco entered the smoke-filled and noisy room, and as he entered, the maiden from behind the bar yelled out, "Say your name, or drink's on you!" Falco, getting caught a little off guard, shouted, "Folco Hornblower!" The room went silent. Falco fed every pair of eyes now focused on him. He looked around, and everyone stopped what they were doing and was eyeing him from head to toe. Then, without warning, someone in the back yelled out, "The Slayer of the Beast!" And another responded, "The Saviour of Buckland!" And another, "Folco the Wolf Hunter!" The room went into a collective uproar, and every hobbit near Falco came over and slapped his shoulder, back, and chest. The rest stood and shouted, clanking tankards and breaking out into song. All Falco could think was that this was going to be a very, very long night. Falco woke up with the sun shining brightly through an open window on the second floor of the Turnip's root. How he got back there he couldn't remember. His head throbbed and ached from the previous night's drinking that dragged on into the wee hours of the morning. It was close to lunch, and Falco wanted to be out of Whitfurrows and on his way to Scary after sunrise. But the residents and visitors at the Perch had other plans, as all gathered to sing songs, drink, and tell tales about Falco, Berilac, and the calling of the black beast of the old forest. It wasn't until the mid-afternoon before Falco was able to make his way on the north road out of Whitfurrows, over the water, and into Budgeford. Falco noticed many names across the small shops and on the posts signaling the laneways of Budgeford. They all referenced the Bolger lineage of hobbit names. Proceeding along the north road to the east, lush, fertile land stretched north and east beyond the horizon, towards what Falco figured was the Brandywine. Few travelers he met on the road north, only the occasional merchant from Dwalling, on their way to the markets in Whitfurrows, their cart laden with quarried stone, iron ingots, and other raw materials to sell or barter. Evening came, and Falco found a grove of trees to break for the night and set camp. Billy rested peacefully, grazing on the lush green grasses of the Shire. The evening came and went with no trouble, and what was left of his throbbing headache was no more. The sun rose over the eastern horizon, the rays of light blowing away the thin layer of mist that gathered over the fields of what Falco would later find out as the Bridgefields. After a light breakfast, Falco with Billy continued north to Scary. Continuing north and rising far off into the distance, Falco noticed what could only be the range of hills called Scary, and as it rose further and further higher, a few buildings began to come into sight, and the village of Scary was near. By mid-afternoon, Falco reached the outskirts of the town, and unlike Whitfurrows, Woodhall, or Buckland, the hobbits that had been out on the road didn't pay heed to Falco or Billy. After a few unanswered hellos and "Good day to see you, sir," to passing hobbits of Scary, Falco quickly realized these weren't the most welcoming of folk. Hard at work they were, and as far as Falco could tell, not too worried about their look. Most wore dusty and dirt-stained clothes, hair unkempt, and faces that could have done with a slight wash, covered in what looked like dirt and smoke dust. Getting to the center of town, Falco spotted what looked like a watering hole, a place called Sour Grapes. "I think we best get a quick bite and drink and move past this place, Billy. These folks don't seem to take to strangers well. Wonder what has them in such a dour mood," Falco tying Billy to the railing just outside the pub entranceway. Opening the door, a small bell rings, and unlike the Perch and Whitfurrows, no one cared to check who entered. Falco didn't mind this after what happened 2 nights before. Walking over to the patron, Falco went to speak, but was quickly interrupted. "Best be quick with it. Everyone here is busy, least of which is me, so what will you have?" Taken aback a little, Falco responded. Whatever is pouring and whatever is cooked," the hobbit responded. "Fine, sit over there," and pointed to Falco at a small table in the far corner. The meal wasn't anything to write home about, but not bad either, and the drink was a bland-tasting wine that did the trick, but that was it. Sour grapes indeed, but by the looks of the hobbits of Scary, they really didn't care. Falco quietly sat and eavesdropped on a number of the conversations happening. Nothing he heard about the happenings in the south, more of what's been happening around the hills of Skerry. One in particular piqued his interest. An older hobbit came in and spoke about the mines out of the Brockenbores, the village to the west of Skerry.
So, did you hear about the Griffo Headstrong over at Brockenbores? Been sick for days, can't get rid of it, whatever he caught. I mean, I know it ain't the cleanest of work, but we've been mining these hills for years, and nothing like this fell upon anyone. That's the 4th bloke in a fortnight coming downhill. I don't like it one bit. Believe I'm going to talk with the mine boss in the morrow and ask what we should do before going down to the mines here in Skerry. I mean, I've got mouths to feed. I can't afford to be laid up in bed.
Another spoke up in response. Well, I hear that someone found an old goblin skull on one of the shafts that open up. Sure, it was only a few weeks ago they dug out that new vein, and then all of a sudden people start dropping like flies off the kitchen window. From the bar, a hobbit turned around. Hey, come on! This says that old Gumfimble, the goblin chief that bull roarer clean smacked his head off, that golf was started. That just before he was headless, he cursed the Shire and would exact his revenge. Aye, maybe this is it. The barkeep clanked down on some tankards and put his hands on the counter. Grow up, the lot of ye. I've gone off your rockers. Those young lads they got now mining up there in Brockenbores, they're just plain old up and lazy. Never seen a hard day's work. Just looking for time off. Pfft, cursed stories. Hobbits dropping like flies. Where do you come up with these things? Falco experienced enough already in a short time in the Shire that things aren't always as they appeared, and maybe there was something to this malady that has been fallen the Brockenbores. Standing up and paying for the meal, Falco asked the keeper of the bar, how does one get over to Hardbottle? Take it you haven't been around here before. Well, you're too clean for one. That's an obvious sign, the hobbit giving Falco the look over. Head west to the Brockenbores and continue on until you another road. You'll see it going north. That'll take you to Dwalling, and past that is Hardbottle. Now, if you're finished eating and paying, best be off. Can't have too many loiterers. Then all sorts of people will just stay here. Grumbled the barkeep, turning abruptly, going about his business. Falco nodded his head and walked out the front door. Billy stood waiting, like a sentry on guard. To the Brockenbores, Billy. We'll hold up there for the night. But before Falco could untie and lead Billy to the road leading west, Falco hadn't realized that the sunny day now turned dark, and with heavy, dark gray clouds having rolled in from the west, and the rain started to pour. I believe our welcome is overstayed here, Billy. Otherwise, I'd look for an inn. But I think we'd have best a more comfortable berth outside of town than in it. Let's see how far we'll get. The road from Skerry to Brockenbores was rough, to say the least. The rain sure didn't help. The huge ruts which had been created by ore and stone-laden carts from the mines filled with muddy water, and traversing the road was a laborious ordeal. As the light waned, Falco stopped and found what he could for shelter, which wasn't much. A cold and wet evening it was, and by morning both he and Billy were soaked almost to the bone. Fortunately, the morning sun rose as it did the previous days, warm and bright, blowing whatever mist or fog was blanketing the hills to the north, and the grassland and pastures to the south. Falco could see way off into the distance what he wagered was Brockenbores. Similar to Skerry, what smiles there were, the above-ground buildings and the large structures towards the hills all seemed to be in the same state, dusty, dirty, and sooty. A blackened grey smoke rose from the number of buildings off in the far hills, Falco thinking they must be the foundries and smithies working the mine, or into a usable iron for making all manners of metal objects. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a loud, heavy-sounding bell rang out throughout the valley, and the town was built in. Falco noticed now hobbits of all sizes rushed out of buildings, dropped whatever it was they were doing, and ran as fast as they could to what Falco could only think was the mines. Falco followed suit. Reaching the entrance to the mine, and over the sounding of the mine bell tower, shouts and calls from inside the entrance to the mine tunnel could be heard. Cries from the women sounded all over the gathered onlookers. Children huddled and hung to their mothers. Falco overheard whispers. Not another. Hope it's not Fastred. Someone needs to shut this place down before it's too late. On and on the rumblings of the gathered hobbits continued. Then out of the shadows of the tunnel came a score of hobbits, a handful pulling a cart. From where Falco was standing, he could see the unmistakable sign of hobbit feet, just a pair of dangling from the rear. "Oh no, it's Fastred!" cried cried out one of the Hobbit women. Another, who had accompanied her, "This mine should have been closed down weeks ago with the first. What's wrong with you?" The Hobbit lady, now pointing at a group of well-to-do hobbits standing, papers and smoking pipes in hand. The group of well-to-doers turned to each other, and after a few moments, one of them spoke up, loudly to the gathered group of hobbits and hobbit miners. "We're shutting down the mine now until we figure out what is going on. Please, go home, and we'll take care of it, and we'll let you know what we find out." The gathered hobbits and miners alike, almost all in unison. "It's about time! Finally, you dwellings get it! What good that it does the poor fellow in that cart! Should have been closed weeks ago!" Off they all shuffled now. Some continued to shout, others sobbing and crying, others just in solemn contemplation. The handful of what could only think was the mine administrators, gathered around slowly, proceeded to go towards the mine entrance. Workers from within and around the mine started to pick up their tools and belongings, setting aside wagons, underground gear, and the like. The yard virtually now empty, Folco walked up towards the standing group of hobbits. "What seems to be the trouble?" Folco interjected, the hobbits as they spoke to one another. Coughing, a one Earling Goldworthy turned to Folco, brow raised. "I can see you're not from around here, for you know what was happening." The others, in unison, turned to face Folco, and Goldworthy continued. "Well, you see, the workers seem to be convinced this mine is cursed, causing a grave sickness. I call gobbledygook, and just an excuse to get off work. But, this being the 5th poor unfortunate soul that's come out of the mine in this past month, so I cannot, in all good conscience, send in another young lad, lest we cause a revolt and the townsfolk burn the whole place down." Goldworthy eyes Folco up and down, and Billy behind him. "I see you're not of the gardening folk. Bit of a hunter, I wager, by that bow of yours. And a well-seasoned pony by the looks of it. I'd almost wager you're one of the Bree-Land Hobbits." Folco nodded in agreement. "Well then, how's about we come to an agreement? Something of a mutual benefit for you and for us." Folco paused, taking a deep breath, and not that he wanted to do anything dangerous, still found himself answering, "What did you have in mind?" The hobbits gathered in the head office of the mine master, and after some tea, some smoking of pipes, and animated discussions amongst everyone, Folco, led by Goldworthy, exited the building and out into the main grounds of the mine. "Well, Mr. Hornblower, if the story is true, then you're the right hobbit for the job. Besides, not sure I'd find anyone from here to Scary or even to Quarry to go down into those tunnels now. I'll make sure your pay is ready when you come back out. When do you plan on going in?" Folco responded, "In the morning," and bid Goldworthy a farewell, and we'll see him when he returned from his investigations. Folco was given keys to a boarding room on the mine grounds, and a place to tie Billy up for the evening, and during his time delving into in the tunnels. Folco retired for the evening, and although he rested, he tossed and turned, staring at the ceiling for most of the time. He whispered to himself, "What have you gotten yourself into now, Folco?" We'll continue the journeys of Folco Hornblower next time. If you like the story and the content I'm creating, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Cheers.